Pando, kill the beat.
I don't know who, somebody need to hear this. Y'all don't speak Hebrew, that's Yiddish. How the fuck you try to label us anti-Semitic? We the Israelites, blacks and native Hispanics. The Germans getting locked up for the Holocaust. Meanwhile, black people still up in the Holocaust. 100 million of us died in the transatlantic. 6 million died, y'all want the world to never forget it. You can never be a Jew, you a Ashkenaz. This ain't a star dum-dum, a gun that would die. Yeah, Yeezy told the truth and got ostracized. Not one person in the Bible had on the yarmulke. We was slaves in America like we was in Egypt. Y'all don't even fit the curses in the Torah neither. Y'all was blind to the truth, I had to make it clear. How Jerusalem, your land, your people came from Europe. That was 1947, your menorah got 9 sticks, it's really only 7. Yeah, it's us against the world, Armageddon. This what happened when you inherit lies from your ancestors. Y'all the synagogue of Satan with them black hats. Your whole nation sitting ducks, Aflacs. Bunch of thieves and culture vultures, ain't nothing kosher. To tell the truth, you vagabonds don't have a culture. Macedonia, Alexander and Philip, you a convert, so tell me, how the fuck is you Israel? That don't make you the people just cause you live there. Why my people can't hate your people like y'all hate Hitler? All the prophets was black and was called nigga. Y'all don't even fit the description that's in the scriptures. Abraham, all the way down to Jacob, we the real Jews. Y'all don't study Christ, y'all follow the Talmud. Keep it real, yeah, let's keep it real. Cold hard truth, it give you chills. Say y'all Jewish cause y'all ain't really them. About to do them like Hammond, it's the Feast of Purim. U.P.K undefeated, this an easy win. We was born fighting, y'all the evil twin. Jacob took hold of his heel, then out came his little red bastard, they kosher deals. It's only 12 tribes, y'all trying to make it 13. Esau despised his birthright, the Lord cursed him. He ain't the devil, who is? I'm still searching. Ask your rabbi, why he get them babies herpes? I don't know what's worse, that or you claiming that you a Maccabee. I'm about to cancel, everybody try to cancel ye. I ain't afraid to speak, this what I do. They riding to the core, I'm just judging them by their fruit. Cause they ain't suffering curses. If I was carnal, I promise I'd punch you in person. I know this an uncomfortable subject. They making millions off our culture and black people suffering from it. Yeah, they don't believe in Christ, they the Antichrist. Make a living off of niggas, they a parasite. I ain't afraid to tell the truth, niggas terrified. I'm about to go DEFCON 4, I ain't satisfied.
That is proof, that is absolute proof that they know we are the real Jews. That's absolute proof. Now you got the records. Go find me a white Jew on any archaeology in Egypt anywhere. You will never find a piece of archaeology with white people as slaves in Egypt. So don't tell me that they were slaves and it's their identity, and they know it. And I know the blasphemy of them which say they are Jews. They are not. The Lord knows the blasphemy of you so-called white people that say you are Jews and you are not Jews. You are not the people of the law. You are not God's chosen people. God's chosen people are living in the ghettos of America. God's chosen people are in poverty and depression in the streets of America. God's chosen people are walking around in America with no idea. Yeah, don't have messed up, no. Bad news is to beat your home, nigga. Yeah. Go on, get on that ass real quick one time. 144, baby. Run that shit up, Trey.
They said you get on, you gon' represent. I said, of course. Soon as they crank that beat, I ride that bitch just like a horse. She about to go dumb, yeah, bitch, me a whole car. You ain't know they call me Obi-Wan. I come with the force. You gon' ride, yeah, of course. Get it lit up like a torch. You even low on this law, so that bitch is either or. Yeah, I know them niggas ain't cut like that. I swear I'm to our core. Wait up, let me make a call right quick. I'ma start another war. I was hurting when she left, but I don't care about any part. I need a Vaselina like my Nina Puffer bar. Took a Zoc, watch the dark. Matter of fact, like a dart. Any problem, let them come. We gon' snatch they soul like Shang Sharp. Put them out of service, keep them tools like Miss Hopper Free. Try to hold me, it's way too late. I'm headed straight to the safe. Throw that one up like a trophy. I'm that nigga, ain't no debate. Told them boys we taking over. Call them up like set the date. This shit a piece of cake. Yeah, my bitches came from Whole Foods. Told them put on that top 3. Then bring me my house shoes. Don't make excuses, make moves. These niggas ungrateful, gotta show them U.P.K rules. I make hits like I can't lose. They said you get on, you gon' represent. I said of course. Soon as they crank that beat, I ride that business like a horse. She about to go dumb, yeah, bitch, me whole guard. You ain't know they call me Obi-Wan. I come with the force. You gon' ride, yeah, of course.
sisters, man, if you like what you hear, hit the subscribe button, man. Subscribe to this channel. And also, please go to isupk.com and pay your tithe. Drop me some cash so we can move around this planet like we need to, man, and do the things we need to do.
They're one west. They're one west. They're one west.
Hey, Shalom, Yahweh Bashem Shabrakatam to all the brothers, Yahweh Shamar Latan Bashem Yahweh to all the sisters, and priest and officer 500 Barak Yala with the I.S.U.P.K, which stands for the Israelite School of Universal and Practical Knowledge, started out of 1 West 125th Street, Harlem, New York, under command of John YAHANNA. You understand? Since 1969, we're giving you the truth about your history, about your culture, your language, who you are, your identity, right? And it's been a minute, but we're back with the Sunday evening history classes. We're live on I.S.U.P.K Montreal, Toronto, Haiti, La Pura Neta as well. Make sure you like, share, comment, subscribe, right? We got a good topic today. Something that you probably never heard of, right? Just like you probably never heard of slavery in Canada. We probably even never heard about some of the black figures in Canada or in Montreal, in Toronto, in Nova Scotia, whatever the case is. And this is what we're going to talk about today, you know, about some prominent black figures in Montreal specifically. This is why the class is called Montreal Black Then. We have a long PowerPoint, right? So let's get to it. Might have to do 2 parts of the class. Let me see. Let me share my screen. Give me 1 moment. Any questions or comments, make sure y'all put it in the chat. There you go. So Montreal Black Then, because yes, slavery was prominent, really prevalent in Canada. Montreal, as a matter of fact, had the biggest slave market in Canada. You know, I think second was probably Toronto, Ontario. I might be mistaken, but the province of Quebec had the most slaves in Canada. But let's get to it. Montreal Black Then, right? It's all about a sister named Rose. Yeah. So it says Rose was born a slave in Montreal in 1768. Again, there was slavery in Canada. A few years after the British took Canada from France. In the summer or fall of 1791, when she was about 23, her master, a fur trader, took her to Michigan Territory, then to his trading post at Prairie du Chien in what later became the state of Wisconsin. When he died, another trader took her to Upper Louisiana, to St. Louis in what is now Missouri. And finally, in 1798, she wound up as the slave of Auguste Chouteau, one of the founders of St. Louis. And there she stayed far from where she was born and grew up. All these St. Louis, damn near a major part of the Midwest, if not the whole Midwest, used to be considered New France, right? And a lot of the slaves, a lot of the native slaves came from there, and were enslaved in modern day Canada, right? But this sister was, she was born a slave in Montreal when slavery was still prevalent in Canada, in Montreal specifically, right? And she was basically shipped around. It's not as if she'd been aching to move to St. Louis. Halfway across North America from Montreal, she had no choice. It's what her masters wanted. That's all that counted. That's how it was in the days of slavery. Now keep in mind, she was born in Montreal as a slave, and she had to move all across multiple states and ended up in St. Louis, which is really important to not forget where she ended up. You're gonna understand why. She had 2 children who lived to be adults, a son, Pierre, and a daughter, Charlotte. Since she was the slave of Chouteau, her children also were his from the get-go. That's how it was. Salakia. And when Rose died and her masters died, her children became the property of her master's son. Then in 1840, Pierre and Charlotte got into their heads that they ought to be free. They went to court in Missouri to claim their freedom. Why were they slaves? Only because their mother had been considered a slave. But that was all a big mistake. They said no, Rose was no slave because there had been no slavery in Canada when she was born. That's the argument they're given, right? Let me move this a bit. Slovakia. Now, what kind of argument, what kind of crazy argument was that? Of course, there was slavery in Canada, specifically in Montreal when Rose was born. And for about 40 years afterwards, right into the early 1800s, I think slavery in Canada ended in 1834. There were black slaves like Rose and Indian slaves called Pawnee, which is the French for Pawnee. For those who say that the so-called natives were never slaves, listen, they were right next to us. You understand? They were right next to us on the plantations, in the fields, on the boats, so on and so forth. You understand? So now her children are saying, well, we're not slaves because our mother was not a slave. Because at the time, there was no slavery in Canada. That's the argument they're given. You know, they were born free, for lack of better words, quote unquote, right? The Montreal Gazette, the only game in town in those days, which is the newspaper, which is still, I think, I'm not sure if it's still alive today, but advertised slaves for sale. And there were court cases as late as 1800 over slaves who had run away from their masters. The slave owners were so upset at the judges who let the runaways go free that they petitioned the Assembly in Quebec City in 1799 and again in 1800 to spell out the rules regarding slavery. We know this for a fact. It's all down in black and white, meaning it's all documented. You would have to be out of your mind to deny that slavery existed in Montreal when Rose was born. Why, besides the fact that they were advertising slaves for sale, there were court cases, everything is documented. I mean, listen, Canada and the US have the same exact history. But now, mind you, that they are arguing this, but they're in St. Louis. You know, it's like they don't have the knowledge that slavery is prevalent in Canada because maybe they've never been there. You know, I'm talking about the white people who they're arguing this about, right? So Rose's children did not have much of a legal leg to stand on. And sure enough, Pierre lost his case in 1845. Charlotte's dragged on from 1847 to 1862, 15 years. What happened is that the judges of the circuit court in St. Louis, instead of interpreting the laws of Canada, left it up to the juries to decide whether there had in fact been slavery in Canada. The judges in St. Louis don't know nothing about what's going on in Canada, apparently. You know, that's why they're like, yo, listen, we're gonna leave it to the juries. They're gonna decide whether or not they're slaves. You know, who cares whether there was slavery in Canada or not? They don't know, they don't care. They're not trying to look it up. And it's not like you had Google back then, right? To just Google it. Is there slavery in Canada? Was Rose born a slave? Was there slavery when she was born in Montreal, right? It's like they don't know what's going on in Brazil. A lot of them, I say a lot because some people knew, but a lot of them don't know what's going on in that Caribbean islands. They just care about what's going on in St. Louis. They don't even know what's going on the West Coast. You just give a damn about what's going on in St. Louis, right? So to help them make up their minds, the court asked for the opinion of two top Montreal judges who had been around when slavery was still practiced there. The two judges, James Reed and Samuel Gale, both gave statements, like it or not, that slavery had existed in Canada, even if there had been no single law that said flat out, "Hear ye, slavery exists in Canada." Other evidence was presented about treaties and laws and proclamations that spoke of slavery in Canada. Basically, there was no law that said, yes, at the time, you will not see a document that says slavery is legal in Canada, right? It was ordained by the king, Louis was it the 14th or the 15th? One of the kings of France at the time that was New France. He said, go ahead, have your slaves. Canada fought hard to have their slaves and to keep them. So these two judges, they say, yeah, there was slavery in Canada. There's still is slavery in Canada, right? And there was slavery until 1834, officially, right? So now, so you've got an all-white, all-male jury in the slave state of Missouri. You've got all the evidence proving that slavery existed in Canada when Rose, Charlotte's mother, was born. The deck is stacked against Charlotte, but lo and behold, the jurors, who are all white, all male, don't buy it. Imagine that. Their ignorance is playing in her favor. They're like, damn, it can't be slavery in Canada. Imagine that. These dumb white people, I mean, that's a good thing. That's when, you know, the stupidity of white people helped the case of a sister. For real. Despite all the evidence to their way of thinking, there had been no slavery in Canada, and a story. Well, not quite. Charlotte's master appealed the verdict, and the Supreme Court of Missouri ordered a new trial, saying that it was up to the judge, not the jury, to decide whether slavery had existed in Canada. But a new trial ended with the same result, so there was yet another trial with the same result. The thing is that if they can't prove slavery was in Canada, I mean, she's not a slave. If she's not a slave, he can't keep her. This man mad as hell. He's like, wait a minute. I know there was slavery in Canada. Her mother was a slave. So she's a slave by default. Right? And because they're dumb as hell, which is a good thing in this case, they're saying, well, we can't just enslave her because you say slavery is in Canada. We have no proof that there was. And they're not looking it up. So they petitioned this like, yo, listen, it cannot be up to the jury to decide whether slavery existed in Canada. Ask the judge. Damn, they made two Montreal judges that say, yes, slavery was prevalent in Canada, especially in Montreal. And despite all the evidence, it's just because they're dumb as hell. They're like, yeah, you know what? We don't have proof there was slavery in Canada, which works in the sister's favor. So here's a petition, yeah. So last week I was in circuit court when the closing arguments were made in the case of Charlotte versus Chouteau. Charlotte sues for her freedom. This case has been 16 years in court. She's still fighting. Listen, that's our people. We fight till the end. That's the spirit you want to have. Charlotte beat him at first, but the case was sent to the Supreme Court, which reversed and remanded the cause. So she was free, but then he made an appeal. She was not free no more. But let's find out the conclusion of the matter, yeah? It's because the court decided that the law of Canada on the slave question was a matter of for the consideration of the court and not for the jury. The jury dumb as hell. They say, listen, we don't have proof there's slavery in Canada. It's just hearsay. As far as the jury in St. Louis. If you would have been probably up north, she probably would not have a chance. Because up north, they're running away from slavery in the US, and they're running away back and forth. They're running away from slavery in the US and Canada. They run away from slavery in Canada into the US. Right? So on the second trial, Charlotte beat him again. And the Supreme Court reversed the decision because the circuit court decided that the law of Canada on the slave question was matter of the consideration of the jury and not of the court. And the case was remanded for a new trial. So they're basically playing ping pong. They're going back and forth just to make sure. Like, he's fighting. You see these devils, right? You see how white people, they say they fight for freedom. You know, you're proud to be American. You fight for freedom, whatever the case is. It's for their freedom. When it comes to you, they will fight tooth and nails. These devils will be ready to go broke to fight to keep you enslaved. It's been proven she's not a slave. They're going back and forth to make sure that, yeah, she's a slave. Her mother was born in slavery in Canada. Therefore, the children that she bared are slaves by default. He's not letting that go. Good for the slave master Shuto, because now that means she's a slave. He gets to keep his slave. If it ain't, good night. He lost the slave. It was submitted again last week, and Charlotte had succeeded. It will go up to the Supreme Court again. Shuto is worth 1 or 2 millions and is 70 years old, has only one child, a daughter by a slave, whom he has educated. He has a lawyer who fully sympathizes with him and whose eyes sparkle with the holy indignation as he commented upon the testimony of Chief Justice Reed of Canada, who testified to the wicked character of slavery as he considered it. So he has a lawyer friend that say, yo, listen, good night. There's so much evidence to show that, you know, Rose, Charlotte's mother, is a slave. Therefore, Charlotte is a slave by default, but they're not accepting it. And he said he's worth millions, so he's spending money to just go back and forth in court and appeal and appeal and appeal the case to no avail. Why? Because she keeps winning the case. At this point, just let her go. But these white people love to oppress you so much. It doesn't matter if he could buy another slave or not. You know, it's not even the fact that she probably meant something to him. She really didn't. If she did, she would be free. But white people just love to have you as slaves. That's it. Like, he's fighting tooth and nails, millions after millions, so that he's making sure he's not losing the slave. He's not losing the battle. It doesn't matter if he lost 10,000 times. He's making sure, no, we're appealing this case until, now he's 70 years old. Go, you know, go make some, at this time, go make some moonshine or something. You know, you have probably a whole plantation. Go enjoy the rest of your kingdom while you can. You understand? Instead, no, he's making sure that that one specific slave is not going away. Goddamn devil. And here's his mansion. Look at this. You're 70 years old. You got this mansion in St. Louis, right? Gabriel Shuto, goddamn Frenchman. He got this mansion. Listen, enjoy your mansion. You're 70 years old. What do you have to do fighting to keep this woman enslaved? You understand? The white man is the goddamn devil the Bible speaks of. You can't tell me otherwise. The goddamn monster. At 70 years old, you're fighting to keep one specific slave? That's crazy. Now, most I grasp for Charlotte and the loophole in the system. Because they can't prove that she's a slave if they can't prove slavery was existing in Canada, even though they have all the evidence. White people dumb as hell, which played in her favor. Salakia. So now, the judges on the Missouri Supreme Court knew that the jurors of Charlotte's case were out to lunch, but they also knew that while they could keep ordering new trials till the cows came home, meaning until, you know, they could keep ordering new trials over and over again. It's never going to end, right? If all of them were going to end the same way, well, in the end, they recognized that so long as the existence of slavery in Canada was treated as a question of fact for a jury to decide, the jury had the final word. I mean, they never know. They don't have Google. Nobody's going to travel up from St. Louis to Montreal to verify and back to verify if slavery actually exists, or did it exist ever. No, they said, listen, if this is how we're going to figure out if slavery existed or not, you know, if this is how we're going to figure out about the case, I mean, at the end of the day, listen, we don't know, we don't care. That's pretty much it. So if we can't prove slavery existed in Canada at the time that Charlotte's mother Rose was born, well, just let it go. Get yourself a slave somewhere else. They don't give a damn. And Most High in Christ with a sister, you know, the loophole played in her favor. So the juries have decided that there was no slavery in Canada when Rose was born. We know that's not so, but we can't do anything about it. Our hands are tied and Charlotte is free. There you go. You can't do nothing. You're going to keep appealing the case to no avail. Just let the sister go. And that's it. Goddamn monster. So she's free at last, and all because some mule-headed men denied that Canada had ever known slavery. Go figure. If you'd been picked for the jury knowing that what you know, would you have set those jurors straight? The truth shall, they say the truth shall set you free. In the case of Charlotte, I mean, the truth is, the truth would have crushed Charlotte. That's the truth, right? The truth is, the white man is the devil the Bible speaks of. That's really it when it comes down to it. You understand? So Missourians apparently have a reputation for taking nothing at face value. You've got to show them proof. But again, nobody would have taken a horse, a donkey or whatever, a mule, and rode from St. Louis to Montreal to prove that slavery was prevalent in Canada. No. You say, listen, it is what it is. But again, that loophole played in Charlotte's favor because now she's a free woman. Most High in Christ. Apparently, Missouri is called the Show Me State. Let's see right here. It says, that's why Missouri is called the Show Me State. It says on their license plates. And Quebec's plate says Je me souviens, which means I remember. Right? Clearly, Quebec don't teach that slavery was in Canada. So clearly, they have bad memory because they don't remember slavery in Canada. As far as Missouri just said, they're a Show Me State. You showed them there was slavery until they could see it for their own eyes. They'll say there's no slavery, and most High in Christ Charlotte is free. So now, if you spot a Missouri plate, remember Charlotte who went free. And when you see a Quebec plate, remember Rose who was a slave as she used to live there. Let's go to the next one. Now, a lot of y'all may have heard of Uncle Nearest. Uncle Nearest, or Nearest Green, is the slave who what you call it again? He's the one who made Jack Daniels, right? The whole recipe for Jack Daniels. And Jack Daniels was a slave master who stole the secret recipe. But did you know that we also had our Canadian Uncle Nearest? We did. Nobody's teaching that though. Nobody could show you that. And today, Most High in Christ for the Truth, Most High in Christ for the Israelite School of Universal and Practical Knowledge, you will learn about the Canadian Uncle Nearest. You understand? So Mr. Whiskey himself, that's what they call him. Let me see if you start here. So you could say, don't read this if you're under 18 or even 21. It's about booze, so you're too young. But it wouldn't help. Meaning, listen, you can tell people to stay away from stuff. They're still going to try it, right? Tell them not to look. They look. It wouldn't do any good, even if you wrote poison on it, on top, and lectured them about liquor's evil spell, as the Reverend Joseph Christmas did. Salakia. Yeah, let's skip that. Let's go to this one. So Joseph Christmas, or Reverend Christmas, whatever the case is, the first minister of the American Presbyterian Church in Montreal, told his congregation in 1828, you know, just don't drink alcohol or whatever the case is. That's what he was telling them. He's long gone, and of course, but the liquor is still with us. They tell him not to taste, and they taste. The point is that Reverend Christmas, just like Reverend Christmas, many white anti-slavery types were moral crusaders, as down on drink as on slavery. And just like they were, quote unquote, against slavery to a certain extent, you know, because they claimed they had a moral compass that they got from the church, which is hilarious. They were against the alcohol, right? So evil was evil, whatever form it took. So when they wanted to point to a shining example of black success to counter the racist lie that free blacks didn't know which side of freedom was up, they weren't about to pick a man who drank no matter how successful he was. Much less would they have picked Caesar Johannot, Mr. Whiskey himself, even if they'd remember him. He didn't import the stuff, he made it from scratch. This is the brother Caesar Johannot, right? He made the whiskey from scratch. And this is crazy. Why? Because today, as we're going to see at the end of this chapter, today, we don't have, nobody knew about him. We don't even have a bottle named after him. You know, at least Uncle Near, someone remembered him and made a whiskey with his name. You know, when it comes to Caesar, he's again on the license plates of Quebec. It says "Je me souviens," I remember. Nobody even knew Caesar to even start to remember him in the first place, right? So when Johannat turned up in Montreal in the 1780s, when slavery was still hasn't been abolished yet, the powers that be were all for making liquor. There were no industries to speak of. Like liquor, most things, buttons, bottles, hairpins, cloth for a fine dress or suit, whatever the case is, had to be imported. That cost money, and there wasn't much of that in Canada at the time. But there was plenty of grain and plenty more land to grow it on. Right? So instead of importing all your booze, you buy the farmer's grain, add water, which is free, cook it, distill it, and sell it to a good price. The money stays home instead of taking the first ship out. Some businessmen twigged to this in 1785. They set up the Montreal Distillery Company on Saint-Sacrement Street between St. Nicholas and St. Pierre. Fur traders, merchants, and the like, they knew how to drink. But what did they know about making good whiskey and gin? They needed a distiller. You would think they would use Caesar first. They would not. White men are hiring white people first, right? First, it seems they picked John Lagord, who besides distilling, also bought and sold slaves left and right. Of course. It's hard to say whether Johannat was even in Montreal yet. It's not clear when exactly he came, but we might take a stab at it. First, look at his name. It's not a name he wears well. He changes the spelling every time he writes it. As you can see, this is how you have different spelling for different names with different slaves. Why? Because who cares? It's not our name in the first place. We're gonna find out that Caesar really is a name, which is hilarious. It's the name you gave slaves, right? Don't be surprised that when you look, when you watch the movie, what's it called? The movie again? Planet of the Apes. Don't be surprised that the main chimp, his name is Caesar. They were giving slaves these names. Yeah, that's racist as hell, but shit, the white man is a devil. So however he write it, they say it's his name, but it's not his name. In fact, Caesar has a slave master written all over it. It was a common name given to slaves in North America. Johannat, however you pronounce it, not so common, and had Boston written all over it. The Johannats were a French Protestant family who had fled France for Boston in the late 1600s. Distilling was their trade, which is where he got his skill from. Zachary Johannat may have been old, in his mid-70s when the American Revolution broke out, but not too old to join the secret Sons of Liberty. He lived to see the Sons' dream of an independent United States come true, but barely. In his will, made out on March 1st, 1784, days before he died, he left to Caesar, formerly my Negro man servant, now a free man, good night, 50 pounds of lawful money to be paid him by my executor within 12 months after my death. So Caesar got a bag after his slave master died, basically. So there was Caesar in Boston in 1784, recently freed with a knowledge of distilling picked up from his master in a 50-pound grub steak. Within the next 2 years, he left for Montreal. What made him do that, we'll probably never know. But a wave of Black Americans, some free, some not, swept up to Canada at the time of the American Revolution. It's like, you gotta find out that, well, in his case, he was a free man, but it says some free, some not, because Blacks were fleeing to Canada. They had underground railroads all the way up to Canada. As a matter of fact, Harriet Tubman, right, helped some slaves escape up to Canada, you know. But yeah, some of them were free, some of them were not. Those were not some of them ran away to escape slavery in Canada. I mean, in the U.S., they went to Canada to escape slavery, and some of them were still slaves and were taken with their what you call the loyalists. The loyalists are a group of white people who remain loyal to the crown. In Canada, after the British took over Canada from France, they became a commonwealth for the crown. So the loyalists, after the Americans freed after the Boston Tea Party, they fled up to Canada with their slaves. A lot of them with their slaves. Then most of them with their slaves. So that's why it says some were free and some were not, right? So some were escaped slaves. Others were slaves who had joined the British side on the promise of freedom, right? For those who don't know, slavery in Canada ended in 1834 because England ended slavery at that year. Some were loyalists, who were the group of white people, right? And others, slaves of white loyalists or of military officers. Again, the loyalists remained loyal. That's what they call it, loyalists. They didn't, rebel against Britain and decided to become Americans, right? They remained loyal to Britain. That's why they call themselves loyalists. And they fled to Canada. So that's when black slavery reached its peak in Canada. After the end of the Revolution, of the Revolutionary War in 1783, but Caesar Johannat was a free man with a valuable skill. And see how he signs his name? He was about the only black man in Montreal in the 1780s who could write. Most whites couldn't do so either. Look at this man. Shout out to Caesar. He can write. If he could write, he could definitely read. Yes, that this man could spell his name, and he can make good liquor. And that shows how white people are dumb as hell. How you run the whole planet Earth? This is a time where you're just colonizing everybody. You can't even write. Good night. White people are dumb as hell. A former slave can write better than you. You can see. Look at this handwriting. This handwriting looks like you could find that today on a check. This man knew how to read and write. Imagine that. You dumb white people can't even do that. Not even in the 1700s. Good night. In the spring of 1786, and Johannat is in Montreal, standing on the mountainside beside a clear stream. He's wondering, or he's daydreaming, or maybe he's checking on how pure the water is, as a distiller might, right? Maybe he has spotted the two soldiers at the fountain a little below him. One thing sure, when the sticks come flying through the air and hits him, he knows where that came from. He got assaulted by two white men. He marches down to the soldiers and gives them hell and tells them he's ready to take them on and the whole British army. And that one of the brave fighting men knocks him down. He got jumped by some white people. You're going to find out when he said, yeah, I'm going to take everybody on. That's a good spirit, but he was saying he was going to take them to court. So Johannat takes on the army, or at least a regiment, but not with his fists. He lays a charge of assault against Soldier Campbell. In court on June 2nd, Campbell claims he never struck the Negro. Caesar, they spell his name like 10,000 different ways. All he did was fling a stick at a dog, and it accidentally hit a Negro. And this Negro got all upset, as if he's not supposed to be. First of all, that's a lie. Our oppressor is the goddamn devil the Bible speaks of, meaning the deceiver. He lies about everything. He can't even take responsibility or accountability for beating up somebody, right? So they throw a stick at him, then they beat him up. He takes him to court, and he's going to lose the case, unfortunately. Which really doesn't care, which really not surprising, especially at the time. Campbell's pal fairly backs him up and says it was he, not Campbell, who punched out the Negro. You get the feel that the whole 34th Regiment is ready to step up and swear Campbell never raised a finger, right? So Campbell walks and Johannat loses his case. Let's drop down a bit. So back to work. Legore, the slave trading distiller, fades from the scene. The Montreal Distillery Company is dissolved early in 1789. Mind you, that was the first distiller that they needed who set up the company, right? Maybe probably a bit before Caesar came to Montreal. So right away, the company is reformed under new owners Todd and McGill and Company, Forsyth, Richardson and Company, and King and McCord. All top merchant houses in Montreal, each own 1/4 of the business. A couple of Quebec City men split the rest. On May 5th, YAHANNA signs a 2-year contract with them as a distiller to manage the distillery in this town as heretofore. Meaning what? Listen, it's the late 1700s. Not only is a free black man with a bag, he has a skill that a lot of y'all wish y'all had. He can make liquor. This man in the late 1700s became a goddamn manager. Imagine that. This man is running a whole company in the late 1700s. And he knows how to read and write. But nobody teaches you that. In Canada, they barely teach you about slavery in Canada. They sure will not teach you about a nigger manager who can make good liquor that everybody wants to buy, that everybody wants to drink, and he can read and write. Good night. See, there's a boss at this point. So he had been Mr. Manager heretofore, but for how long? Possibly only since May 1st, the official beginning of his contract, or it might have been a little longer, maybe since the reorganization. After all, they had to know for sure not only that he could make decent liquor, but also that he could run a business. Nobody taught Caesar how to run a business. He taught. So like he learned from his slave master the art of making whiskey, the art of distilling. That's it. The rest, listen, it's in our blood. You know, it's in our blood. Caesar's a born hustler. Salaki. On top of his salary of 5 shillings a day, YAHANNA got a company house, rent-free. Good night. In fact, he was already living in it when he signed his contract, and they even supplied the firewood for his home. Not bad considering that most blacks in town were slaves or servants or day laborers. This man is running a company. He knows how to make liquor. He's getting paid by the day. Now, mind you, at the time, I think probably you could get 5 shillings, what, a month? This man's getting paid 5 shillings a day. I forgot what's the equivalent of it. Obviously, money's not the same no more, right? This man's getting paid 5 shillings a day. He lives in a company house. He doesn't pay a rent. They're even giving him the firewood for his home. This man is living the life. They will never teach you about success. Listen, the only time they want to talk about successful black people, they want to talk about hockey players, they'll talk about basketball players, they'll talk about rappers, actors, whatever the case is. This man is a freed slave at the time where slavery is still prevalent in Montreal. Mind you that. He's walking around slave masters like, yo, I run this business. I don't even pay rent. I got a bag when my slave master died. I'm still getting a bag a day. You know, good night. You see this shit? They're not gonna teach you about these successful black men in school. They don't even teach you about successful black men in Canada. But imagine that. A former slaves who can make whiskey, you know, he's running a business. Yeah, he's living rent free. Listen, we're still slaves today. I need to be living rent free. Slack it. And he's getting paid by the day. And he doesn't have to go chop the wood to supply firewood for his home or to buy it. They're giving it to him. Imagine that. Most High in Christ. Shout out to Caesar. Now think of Rose or of Hilaire. Think of Henry Moore, hired in November 1785 for 1 month with 3 other men to sweep every chimney in town for about 1 shilling and 4 pence a day, which was pretty good money even if the job lasted only a month. He's getting paid 5 shillings, and they're comparing it to other, like, you know, day laborers, as they call it, or slaves. I mean, the slaves don't even get paid, but some day laborers got paid with about 1 shilling a day. And then after a month, they don't have a job. This man is running a whole business. And at the time, everybody wants liquor. Everybody, the army, all the slave masters want liquor. The church is drinking. They're doing more than that, but you know, the point is he's running a business. Now think of Charity 10 years later working as a tavern servant out at Coteau du Lac for 5 shillings a year. Imagine that, plus room and board. And here's John now making 5 shillings a day with a house thrown in. Imagine making 5 shillings a year. Now this nigga is making 5 shillings a day. Now for Charity, the 5 shillings a year plus room and board, meaning they have to pay for the room and board. He's living rent-free. His house is rent-free, the firewood, he runs the business, and he's getting paid 5 shillings a day. Most High in Christ. Now his contract contained a clause saying it would be renewed at the end of the 2 years unless he wanted out or they wanted him out, in which case they had to give him another 3 months notice. So it's not like they could just fire him whenever they wanted, apparently, because even then, the contract, this man knows how to read and write. Ain't no swindling a nigga into signing something that he doesn't know what he's signed up for, right? It says the contract is renewed at the end of 2 years, unless he wants to quit or if they want him out. And if they want him out, they have to give him a 3 months notice. Looks as if Joe Knott stayed about 5 years until the company went bankrupt. He and his wife, Margaret Campbell, had a daughter, Ruth, who died as a baby in 1789. But their son, Gabriel, born in 1793, was still kicking. They were living in the company house in the spring of 1794. But with the company up the creek, they had to move, you know, because they live in the company house rent-free. Now they had to move because the company went bankrupt, right? So on April 14, they bought their own place. Imagine that. This nigga could buy his own house. Yeah, they're not teaching you that. They're not teaching you about a successful black man named Caesar who can make liquor, who can read and write, who's running a business, you know, listen, slavery is still on. This is what, probably like 1800, 1789, it said. This nigga bought a house. How many niggas buy houses during slavery? And he's getting paid by the day. Good night. Yeah, they're never gonna teach you that. Listen, on the license plate of Quebec, it says "Je me souviens," I remember. Well, next time, I'll probably make a clip after class. Remember Caesar. Yeah? Remember Caesar, the nigga who deserves a whiskey bottle named after him. You want to stop buying Crown Royal. Stop buying the Canadian whiskey, Crown Royal, Canadian Club. Make a whiskey and name it after Caesar. Name it CJ. Hey, yeah, CJ, Caesar Johannat. That's what you should do. Remember this nigga. And that's what white people like to say. Well, white people were poor; they couldn't afford slaves. Tell them no sweat. You know, we don't give a damn about that. We have Caesar. Caesar was not poor. This nigga ran a whole company and paid by the day. He bought a house in what, 1789, before slavery ever ended. This nigga was rich. Salakia. I could keep going on, but because they don't teach you about this in school. They don't teach you about this anywhere. You know, you will only learn about successful black people in the I.S.U.P.K. You'll never learn that anywhere. You probably won't even be able to find him on Google. Why? Because they don't want you to know the truth. That black people work till, listen, black people really are a successful people when you don't put obstacles in front of them, right? If it wasn't like today, if we didn't have a drug epidemic in our communities, whatever the case is, We'll be successful people. We don't need the white man. Don't you see this man is running a distillery? The white man needed him. Just like today, the white man still needs us. We don't need them. The proof is Black Wall Street. You know, Salaki for a second. The proof is Black Wall Street. Why? Because Black Wall Street, they had to bomb it. They had to bomb Black Wall Street to smithereens. They had to make Black Wall Street look like Palestine today. Nobody's saying, well, pray for Black Wall Street, justice for Black Wall Street. No, we had our own doctors, our own dentists, our black businesses. We gave that up with integration, of course. But just to show that we don't need them, they need us. Caesar is a perfect example of we never needed them. They always needed us. You know? So like, let's get back to it. I'm going to speak to Adiar. We're going to have to make a whiskey called the CJ's, the Caesar. Salakia. So on April 14, they bought their own place, a small clapboarded log house in Saint Antoine suburb, a little northwest of the city, beyond the western wall that stood roughly where McGill Street is now. This man bought a house in downtown. Imagine, listen, if you know about downtown Montreal, you ain't buying no house over there. With what money? Niggas is broke. This man bought a house in downtown. Imagine that. The little river ran by the property. It cost them 33 pounds, which they paid off in 4 years. Damn, this man paid off his house in 4 years. The first year, Johannot hired a carpenter to make about 20 pounds worth of improvements. And in 1797, with 65 pounds borrowed from Dr. Jones and a 25-pound loan from Notary Lucan, plus another 21 pound. Listen, this man is getting loans. This man is borrowing money. This man is hiring carpenters. He's buying property. He's making renovation. Good night. This Caesar is the shit. We need to make a whiskey. I'm gonna learn how to distill myself. You understand? I'm gonna learn the art of distillery. We're making a whiskey called CJ, the Caesar. Make that a clip. Like that. Anyone who wants to, claim that they came up with this first, nigga, listen, you heard it from Barakiala first. You heard it from the priest from the east, from your host doing the most, the best indeed from the West Indies. We're making a Canadian whiskey called the Caesar, CJ. Yeah. Good night, Salaki. He bought a still so that he could make his own liquor, and he built an addition to his house to serve as his distillery. This nigga said, "The hell with the company building. I know the art of the distilling, so I'm buying a still, and I'm renovating the house to where I have my own distillery." The hell, you see what I'm saying? He did not need white people. He make his own thing. White people needed him, and they still don't remember him today. I'm pretty sure he made the best whiskey at the time. I guarantee you that. You know how I know? Because he was running the white man's company. The white man probably embezzled the funds. That's how the company went bankrupt. They never said it's because of him. If it was because of him, you think they would not have let him go earlier than 5 years? Yeah, this man made money. He bought a property. He's like, he made his own distillery. Imagine that. Right before listen, slavery was still, slavery hadn't been abolished yet in Canada. This man is, good night. He has a house in downtown. He made renovations. He made his own distillery. This man is getting, how many niggas are just getting loans just like that? Today, try to get a loan as a nigga. This nigga is getting loans, borrowing money from doctors. Yeah, we're making a Canadian whiskey. I'm gonna say it probably 10,000 more times. I'm making a Canadian whiskey. You understand? Called the Caesar. Damn right, Salakia. So he was all set to go. By this time, there were 4 in the family. His daughter Catherine was born that fall. but maybe the money wasn't coming in fast enough. On January 23rd, 1798, for 10 Spanish silver dollars a month, plus room and board, Johanna was hired by Levi Solomon and Company of Montreal and Cornwall for 3 years to work at Cornwall, where they had a distillery, or at any other port within the provinces of Upper and Lower Canada. So for those who don't remember, Canada was divided in two. Upper Canada, if I'm not mistaken, that was Ontario today, and Lower Canada is what is modern day Quebec, right? And Levi Solomon and Company, as you could tell, these are Jewish people, because yes, the Jewish man made money during slavery. Good night. He was setting up, what do you call it again today? Insurance companies. You know, after slavery, I think they got the most reparations. A lot of slave masters were Jewish, as we see in one of the last classes about slavery in Canada. So he went to work for the Amalekite because they had a distillery. He's like, yeah, I'm gonna just do what I know what to do. Salaki. What I know how to do. Salaki. What am I doing? So in February, while he was out of town, Margaret Campbell leased the distillery and a room in the house to a distiller from Quebec for £20 a year. You know, because she said no point letting all that equipment sit idle. Shout out to Margaret. Margaret is a proud 31 woman. She didn't say, listen, I'm gonna let the distillery gather dust. She said, yeah, we're just gonna rent it out. You know, it was still catching the bag. Shout out to Margaret. You know, some of you sisters need to learn from sisters like Margaret Campbell. That's what y'all need to do. Yeah. Today, what y'all doing is like y'all making these niggas shoot each other and sell all the drugs, end up in jail so they could buy you a Birkin bag. But the hell with your Birkin bag. You understand? And whatever Michael Kors or whatever y'all like to wear. Be like Margaret. You understand? Think business. Right? Don't like y'all want brothers to invest in a BBL so y'all could be an OnlyFans model. Y'all dumb as hell. You know. This man had a wife that knew, like, listen, we renovated the house, right? We have an extra room. And then we made our own distillery. My husband is gone to make some shekels. While he's gone, I'm gonna just rent out the distillery so that we have more shekels, that we stack up more money, more shillings, more pounds. Be like Margaret. Don't get a BBL and go on OnlyFans. Yeah? Think business. Be like Margaret. That's what y'all need to do. You understand? Salakia. Johannat's job with Levi and Solomon seems to have ended well before his 3 years were up. Not to worry, on October 9th, 1798, he signed up to work for 2 years for William Fortune, an Irish-born loyalist from South Carolina who had a still at Point Fortune on the Ottawa River. The pay was good, about £50 a year, plus room and board. And his boss threw in a perk. William Fortune, for the good esteem which he had doth by these present grants, and bequeathed under the, I forgot what's the SD again, Caesar half an acre superficial measure of land near and next his own building in the township of Hawkesbury. Listen, they're not gonna teach you about that. Caesar was given some land. This Irishman is like, yo, listen, I hire you, here's the pay, and guess what? I'll give you a half an acre of land as well. Good night. In the middle of slavery. Imagine that. But before his 2 years with Fortune were up, Johanna died at Sorel, at the mouth of the Richelieu River on June 8, 1800. He's buried here under the name Caesar Jonnet. He never got to see his youngest son, Alexander, born in Montreal 6 months later. And it's hard to say how he got on with other blacks. Why? Because he's free and he's making money. Maybe they might look at him with jealousy or whatnot. All we know is that, you know, he was a free man. He was not a slave. He made a bag. He bought a house, and he knew how to make liquor. For instance, we know next to nothing about his wife, Margaret Campbell. On February 6, 1797, He was a witness at the funeral of a Mary Campbell. Was she an in-law? They gave her the age as 51 when she died and said she was a black woman living at His Excellency General Christie. That didn't mean that she was shacked up with Christie. Living at or living with was white speak for slave of. So his wife was a daughter of a slave, sometimes servant of what Haitians called reste avec, meaning as lives with, a slave in all but name. Right? Slovakia. So General Gabriel Christie, 74 years old then, Colonel, commandant of the 1st Battalion, 60th Royal American Regiment of Foot, Seigneur of Bleury, Lachenay, Lacolle, Léry, Repentigny, and Noyon, had several slaves. So his wife's mother was a slave. He had shared the seigneury of Noyon by Lake Champlain with one of the biggest slave owners, Colonel John Campbell, until Campbell's death in 1795. Maybe it was from that Campbell that Margaret Campbell and Mary Campbell took the name. Slaves sometimes borrow their master's family name, or it was given to them, whether they like it or not. Now, a couple of weeks after Mary Campbell's funeral on March 5th, John Knott was a sponsor at the baptism of Phyllis Murray. The church record said she was a 42-year-old black woman living with, which is just another term to say that she was a slave, Alexander Henry on Notre Dame Street. The co-sponsors with Johanna were Mandeville Turner, one of the many names for Manuel Allen, sold that summer to tavern keeper Thomas John Sullivan, and Margaret Plovier, a free black woman, wife of Henry Moore, the chimney sweep. Of Johanna's children, all we know of is Catherine, that she was born on November 24, 1797, and that in 1832 she married the laborer Anthony Hinksman. Gabriel was apprenticed to a butcher in March 1807 at the age of 14. His name was written Gabriel Janot then. He was supposed to stay 7 years until he turned 21, but in June 1809, his mother placed him as a servant with the merchant Moses Northrop. This time he was called Gabriel Janot. By then, Margaret Campbell married again to François Houle, a voyageur and small-time crook. If I'm not mistaken, François is a devil, and which is not surprising as him being a small-time crook, Slovakia. So when war broke out with the United States in 1812, Gabriel was working as an orderly on the men's ward at the Hôtel Dieu. In 1814, he joined the militia and served here and there through the last year of the war. Then he returned to Montreal, where he worked as a gardener on the old Simon McTavish estate on the mountain. Funny thing about the Joe Knotts and the mountain, Caesar had been assaulted there by a soldier way back when, and on June 8 in 1815, Gabriel was assaulted there by a soldier, Drum Major William Griffin of the Nova Scotia Fencible Regiment, meaning where he got assaulted, where his father was assaulted as well. Imagine that. White people ain't never changed. Wherever you are, you're a slave to them. You're a nigga, and they'll beat you to death anywhere you go. Slovakia. This time the Joe Knotts won. Mind you, when Caesar got assaulted, he made a court case. He lost. Gabriel, his son, won his court case. A judge, Slovakia, made Griffin promise to keep the peace with all his majesty's subject, but in particular in regard to Gabriel Joannette, or he'd have to pay a 20-pound penalty. Alexander, the baby of the family, went the way of his stepfather into thieving, till they got him banished for 7 years in 1827. And that's about as much as we know of Caesar Joe Knott and his family. At the height of slavery, he was black and he was free. He managed one of Montreal's first industries. And you'd think there'd be a monument, a plaque somewhere, a street name, or a brand of whiskey, even a word slipped in the book, but nothing, right? But you know how country people can be. Listen, I said it again. I'll say it again. We're making a whiskey called the CJ. the Caesar. Yeah, and y'all better buy it. There will be a black whiskey named after a black man who was free at the height of slavery. He was free. He ran one of Montreal's first industries. The man bought a house in downtown Montreal. Imagine that. And he made his own distillery. You never ever heard of his name until today. The white man's a goddamn devil, the Bible speaks of. Salakia. Let's move on, yeah? Salakia, we have, we're gonna do it probably as we're gonna continue next week. We won't be able to go through the whole PowerPoint today. But let's see. So Henry McEvoy, what did he know? He never got to go to school, being a slave kid out in the country at the Rivière de Huron. So in January 1802, when he's telling people he's about 16, he's just guessing or parroting what he's been told. He probably doesn't even know his mother. And if you dropped in on him from the 21st century and told him, Henry, we think your mother may be Rose, he'd probably just blink, think hard and hit a wall. Why? Because he's just going with whatever, he's just going with the flow. Literally. This brother, he don't know really nothing. You tell him he's 16, he's gonna say, yeah, I'm 16. He probably 18, he probably 14. You know, he's just gonna go with the flow. Right? And we'll see how going with the flow, or just, you know, as the title says, if you say so, we'll see where it landed him. Not in a bad spot though, I'm telling you. So you might tell him, Henry, it's as simple as ABC, and we don't know where Rose wound up, but we think she belonged to Martin McEvoy of Saint-Jean, just up the river, who put her up for sale in Montreal before you were born. And B, the notary auctioned her on April 6, 1785, to Pierre Mézières, another notary and a lawyer too, and commissioner of police. Good night. Imagine that. Notaries are buying and selling slaves, and the lawyers. Then in August 1790, Mézières and his wife sold your mother and you to Louis Moken. You had a sister called Jeanne, and at first Mézières kept her for himself. Lord be with her. We know what happens when that happens, right? But in July 1794, after deciding he'd call her Marianne, he sold her to his son-in-law, Adrien Berthelot. Right? You tell that to Henry, and he's gonna be like, yeah, whatever. If that's the case, well, that's all he's gonna say. Yeah. He doesn't know his ABCs. If you tell him it's as simple as ABC, right, he'll never understand nothing. As simple as 1, 2, 3. This man, you know, he's just all he knows is slavery. He just knows how to be a slave, right? Let's go down a bit. So all that matter is the buzz. What he hears, what he sees out there on the flat sea of Snow Mount of Saint-Hilaire. He's like Christopher Columbus out on the ocean. Without the stars at night, he wouldn't have a clue where he stands. So if you ask him his age, you know, he just knows he's young. He knows he's young, or he knows he's old. He's somewhere in between. If you tell him he's about 16, he'll say, yeah, he's about 16. You don't give a damn. You know nothing but being a slave. So this winter, out here on the big snow-covered space between the stars of Vermont, he picks up this buzz from Montreal. The buzz is that slavery is dead. England has passed a law that wiped out slavery all around the world. And of course, England did no such thing, because at the time, slavery was still, very prevalent. But what does a slave kid at the Rivière de Huron knows about England and laws? This man doesn't even know his own age. He barely knows his name. So what does he know about? He doesn't even know what England is. What does he know about England? What does he know about the law, right? It wasn't until 5 years later that England passed a law against the international trade in slaves. Salakia. No more shipping slaves from Africa to the Caribbean, at least not when the Navy's looking. They didn't mean slaves in Jamaica or Barbados or St. Vincent or Trinidad or St. Lucia or anywhere went free. Before they ended slavery, they just said, we're not importing slaves no more. That was pretty much it, right? So if Henry had been to school, he might have written a letter to whom it may concern in any of the islands every year for 32 years, asking, whom are you free? And whom could have told him, dear Henry, no. Why do you keep asking? How should he know? Yeah, if he could have, he would have asked someone if they're free, right? This man never went to school. This man just knows how to be a slave again. But he heard that England passed a law that wiped out slavery. That's what he heard. But he knows the buzz and he believes it because he wants to. It doesn't matter if it's true or not. He heard slavery ended. Then I'm not a slave no more. So he follows the river road to its end, where the Rivière de Huron spills its heart out into the Richelieu, and he makes his way across the frozen river of Chambly. And he lets people know he's up for work. Why? Because he wants to be hired. He wants to be paid. But let's see what they say. On January 10th, with William and Philip Byrne, he walks in on Pétrimou, the notary. Henry says, yes, he's a slave, but he wants to take advantage of the English law freeing all slaves, and he wants to go work for the Byrnes as a free man. He just walks up to say, listen, apparently slavery ended. I want to take advantage of the fact that slavery ended to be free. Slavery never ended, but he heard so. So he's like, yeah, let me take advantage of that. And yes, you could say he's about 16 and maybe that not old enough to be signing a contract, but he's alone in the world, got no mother, father, nobody but the stars. So he has to sign for himself. But it will have to be an X because no star even taught him to write. Yeah, a lot of slaves didn't know how to write their own name, so they would just put an X where it's asked to sign for something, right? Now, Pétrimou knows the law. At least he ought to. It's his job. Why? Because he's a notary. And the Byrnes know all about slavery and slave boys of about 16. Why? Because William gave one to Philip, his adopted son, as a wedding present. Gave him a slave woman too. Good night. That was back in the summer of 1793. Besides, Philip Byrne is no dummy. He's the land agent of Sir John Johnson, a big-time loyalist, commander of the King's Royal Regiment of New York in the Revolution, in charge of the Indian affairs, a big landowner. So they certainly know better than a country slave kid who's about 16. That's what you would think so. He didn't just walk up to a random notary. He don't want to work for just random white people. These random white people happen to be slave masters. Pétrimou is supposed to know the law as a notary, right? And Philip Byrne is the land agent of a loyalist who's in charge of the Indian affairs. When they say Indian, they're talking about our Gadite brothers and sisters, so-called natives, right? Who are slaves at the time as well. So they should know better that what is this kid talking about? There's a law that England passed that abolished slavery. What law do you want to take advantage of? So you might expect that one of them would say to Henry, hold it right here and ask a few questions. Like, are you nuts? You know, like what law? Like your master, he knows about this? They don't, because like Henry, they've picked up this buzz from town. Listen, white people are dumb as hell. Just like the first thing we read about Charlotte, who's Rose's, was the daughter of a slave named Rose, right? She took advantage of the white man's stupidity to free herself. She didn't run away. She petitioned for her freedom. Why? Because white people are dumb as hell. And she got freed. Why? Because in St. Louis, they said they couldn't prove that Rose, her mother, was born a slave in Montreal. Therefore, if they can't prove she's born a slave, you know, she's no slave. And if she's no slave, her daughter's not a slave either. That's how she walked free, right? This is a similar instance where white people are dumb as hell. They heard, well, apparently England passed a law that slavery ended. And this little slave boy is coming up to us like, yeah, let me take advantage of the law so I could work. You understand? So, and Henry, who walked in there a slave, walks out a free man under a non-existent English law abolishing slavery. Yeah. He walked in there, he's like, yo, listen, let me take advantage. Apparently, slavery is over, which it was not. They let him walk free. See, this is where you need to take advantage of white people's stupidity. You know, that's the second instance you're gonna see in this book. Yeah, white people are just dumb as hell. Which in these two instances was a great thing. Amazing. Because now Charlotte became free. Henry was also became free. Henry don't know his ABCs. He don't even know. He know nothing but to be a slave. He heard slavery is over. He said, yeah. He didn't even care about verifying whether it's true. And now he said, I heard slavery was over. So apparently I'm not a slave no more. He walked in there, told the notary that I want to work for these people and get paid. I am a slave apparently. This dumb notaries, he didn't even care about looking up for the law because he heard the same thing. Who started the rumor? Doesn't matter. Who cares? The brother walked free. Most High in Christ. Again, and Henry, who walked in there a slave, walks out a free man under the non-existent English law abolishing slavery. It's written in his contract with the Burns. It's like a genuine fake ID saying you are who you aren't, and the law is a fact, even if it's fiction. Yeah, that's basically what worked for him. Most High in Christ. Give this brother a hand. Good night. I think we got time for one more. Again, we're going to do a part 2 next week, right? So Charlotte, this one is an amazing one because they don't talk about Henry who walked in there for a free slave. Say, listen, they don't talk about Henry. My favorite one is still CJ. They talk about CJ. They don't talk about Rose, who was born a slave, and apparently her daughter Charlotte managed to use the loophole that white people are stupid, so be free, just like Henry did. So this is another Charlotte, right? So she got the ball rolling. Y'all gonna see how they were mad at her. They're like, damn, she needs to be stopped. So farmer Eden Johnson from Plattsburgh, New York, crossed into Canada on September 23rd, 1794 to hunt down young Dia. 10 days later, Dia had run away from his master, Nathaniel Platt. As a bloodhound in human form, Johnson carried a power of attorney from Platt. He picked up Dia's scent in Montreal and learned he was living up the Rivière du Chêne in Saint-Eustache, on the Lake of Two Mountains. But he hit a snag. He was advised that to claim the runaway, he had to do better than a power of attorney. He had to show proof of ownership, either Platt's or his own. So Johnson went all the way back to Plattsburgh, a good hike in those days, bought Dia from Platt for 80 pounds and returned to Montreal, figuring there'd be no argument now about his entitled to claim the black man. On October 8th, he swore an affidavit, how do you pronounce that word? Salaki. Before Justice of the Peace Thomas McCord that Dia, his slave, was a runaway, and he got McCord to issue a warrant then and there for Dia's arrest. A constable picked Dia up at Rivière du Chêne on Saturday, October 11th, and took him to jail. The case came up to the Court of Quarter Sessions the following Tuesday. An anti-slavery man may have hyped up things a bit when he sent news of it to a paper in Quebec City, which published his account of the case on October 20th. The court heard the argument on both sides, and he wrote and made, much to their honor and the honor of humanity, the following decree: that slavery was not known by the laws of England, and therefore discharged the Negro man. Salakia. Most in Christ with white people and their stupidity. Yeah. They said, did slavery take a hit? You might think that. What? Shalom to Lord in Christ. Shalom to Lord in Christ. Kawaka. Half hour. Come on. Come on, sir. Shalom, Lord Christ. So lucky for that. So you might think that slavery took a hit in these times because white people are dumb as hell. But a lot of good it did. Slavery went on as before. Slavery was still there. You understand? Even though he took advantage of, again, being discharged because apparently nobody knows about the laws of England. You understand? He said, yeah, just free the nigga. That's it. Slavery is dead. You know, slavery was not known by the laws of England. Therefore, they discharged the man. They said, no, you know, he's not, even if he's a runaway over here, he's a free slave. He's a free man. Which was not the truth, right? Just white people are stupid. That's really it. So slavery went on as before until Charlotte came along. We're gonna see what Charlotte did. She was African, but we know she was not African. You know, she was an Israelite. She was not an African slave. We know that. In her mid-30s, came from Guinea. She had been a slave of the Cook family since she was 12. First in the Caribbean, then in Canada. George Cook had been a soldier of the 60th Royal American Regiment. He'd been stationed in the West Indies during the American Revolution when France was helping the American colonies fight the British. Slovakia. In the will he made out in Vincent in 1777, shortly before he died, George Cook left the Negro wench by name Charlotte to his wife. You see how they treat you? Like, even in his will, listen, what I think is they put the quotes there because that's literally what he wrote in his will. You understand? And in her will made out at Antigua, 2 years later, his wife left unto my best beloved daughter, Jane Cook, the daughter of George Cook, by his desire before his death, a Negro wench named Charlotte. After her mother died, Jane Cook moved to Montreal, taking Charlotte with her. Her hand-me-down. Good night. They just named her, they just called her a hand-me-down. Good night. These devils. So again, Charlotte is not African. We dwelt in Africa after 70 AD, right? They may say she came from Guinea. She was African, whatever the case is. She's not. She's an Israelite, right? She's an Israelite. The reason her people were in Guinea at the time because we fled the Roman persecution in 70 AD when the Romans destroyed and took over Jerusalem. That's it. But that's a class for another day, right? So it was from Jane Cook that Charlotte escaped on February 1st, 1798. She didn't run fast enough, and it's like she didn't run fast and didn't run far. She hung around Montreal. Of course, they caught her and told her she had to go back to Jane Cook. But Charlotte played by her own rules. She said, no. This is how you go back to your slave master. She said, la. She said, no. Imagine that. During slavery, you're a runaway slave. You're getting caught. You're like, yo, go back to your plantation. He said, hell no. What are you talking about? Imagine that. Good night. Most High in Christ. So they hauled her off to jail. Chief Justice Monk of the Court of King's Bench in Montreal was an independent cuss, not a likable man. Monk, full of himself, a grasping man, he played by his own rules too. So when Charlotte came up before him to be slapped back into slavery, he said no. Not that he gave a damn about her or about any slave. He just didn't give a damn about shit. So like he didn't give a damn about the rules. He said, yo, listen, this Negro woman is a runaway slave. She said she don't want to go back to her plantation. He said, I don't give a damn. That's basically what he said. He said, you're free to go. The slave owners of Montreal could not believe their ears. Upon his enlargement, they complained to the Legislative Assembly of Quebec. The Negroes in the city and district of Montreal threatened a general revolt. Imagine being a runaway slave, being told to go back to the plantation is as easy as saying no. And then you've been taken to jail, and the judge is saying, "You don't give a damn. You're free to go." Like he didn't want the headache. He didn't give a damn. There they go with their BS. What revolt? There was no panic in the streets, no slave going for his master's gun or his master's throat, no lockdown, no martial law declared. They started lying just because she said no, she was free to go. This son say, listen, they're starting an uprising. We're scared for our lives. That's a lie, right? They just lied about a revolt just because Charlotte said no, I ain't going back to slavery. Oh, the judge said I'm free. I'm free. I ain't going back. The hell, what you talking about? That's it. But it's true. Charlotte started the ball rolling. A couple of weeks later, Judith Gray revolted, running away from Elias Smith. He'd bought her for 80 pounds in Albany, New York, 3 years before. Charlotte was a single woman. But Judith had a husband, John Gray, a slave of merchant John Shutter, or Shooter, however you pronounce this devil name. She was a nursing mother too, her daughter not 2 months old, so she couldn't run fast and she couldn't run far, right? When the law caught up with her, she did what Charlotte had done and refused to go back to her master. She said no as well. They hustled her off to jail, and that's where she was when her baby Amelia was baptized March 4th. And when she came up before the judge, Monk, which is the same judge that told Charlotte, yeah, go ahead, you're free to go. On March 8th, he let her go, like Charlotte. He said that he would discharge every Negro, indented apprentice, and servant who should be committed to gaol or gaol under the magistrate's warrant in the like cases. This man really didn't give a damn. He didn't follow any rules but his own. He said, any slave who come up here, listen, you're discharged, you're free to go. Now, you don't want to go back? No sweat. Shalom. He didn't give a damn. Not because he cared about the livelihood of these slaves. He just didn't give a damn. Also, did you catch the way that he said Negro to mean slave? Because even though it was the same, right? He kept throwing up roadblocks before the slave owners, but he didn't seem to be acting out of concern for the slaves. So again, he doesn't give a damn about the livelihood of the slaves. That's the least important thing for him. He don't care. But he didn't seem to be acting out of concern for the slave, not openly anyway. In Judith Gray's case, Monk didn't declare slavery illegal. Mind you, it's not because he's against slavery. He just don't give a damn. He said that by law, runaway slaves, like misbehaving servants, were supposed to be put to work in a house of correction, not left to stew in jail. The problem is, there was no house of correction. Yeah. So that's why you say, yo, you're free to go. We don't have a house of correction. Shalom. A Simon Legree might have shrugged that off and figured all you needed to keep slaves in line was a good fast horse, a whip, and chains. But the slave owners of Montreal were a law-abiding bunch, and they were hung up because they didn't have the right kind of lockup. Now, as far as being a law-abiding bunch, that's not entirely true, as they're going to make it seem like the slave owners in Montreal, you know, they were soft. Really, it wasn't true, because a lot of slaves in Canada run away into the U.S., and that's how bad slavery was over here, right? There's just a isolated case that they got an idiot judge that just don't give a damn. He said they need to be put in a house of correction. At the time, there was no house of correction. So you say, all right, no sweat. He didn't, you know, he didn't give himself a headache and think too much about the issue. He said, no sweat. You're not going to stay in jail. I'm just, hey, shalom. You're free to go. Yeah, that's literally what he said. And the revolt was not over. After Charlotte and Judith, it was Manuel Allen's turn to revolt on March 1st, even before Judith Gray's fate was decided. 3 slave escapes in a month, but Manuel's case was different from theirs. The heart of it being was he a slave at all? He'd been sold as a slave on August 25th, 1797 at the age of 33 under the name Manuel. Thomas John Sullivan, owner of Montreal Coffee House, had bought him for 36 pounds from soldier Jervis George Turner and his wife. But at the time of the sale, Manuel had also signed a promise to work for Sullivan as a covenant servant, with freedom in it for him after 5 years if he served his master well. So was he a slave or servant or half and half? So on October 29th, Allen had married Sarah Jackson. John Gray was his best man. In barely 4 months after that, he bolted. But Sullivan didn't set the law on him. So far, he had paid only half of the £36 price for Allen, and he refused to pay the rest. Turner and his wife sued him for the balance. Imagine that. Sullivan countered by demanding his £18 back, pleading that the sale was null and void in law, inasmuch as the said Negro man was not at the period of the said sale and transfer a slave of the plaintiffs to authorize or empower them to dispose of the term of his natural life and deceive the defendant. Like, yo, listen, you sold me a good that I could not use because I don't have it. You know, what's the point of selling me a slave and there's no slave? You know, that's basically it. He's like, listen, I want my money back. He ran away. And they said, no, we want the full payment. You paid half, pay the other half. We're suing you for the balance. I mean, this is white people's problem, really. That's what you get for enslaving us. You slave us, you sell us left and right, and then you complain when we run away and you can't have the slave you paid for. And the other party complains because they only got paid half and they demand the full balance. But you don't want to pay the full balance because you don't have the slave that you paid for. Listen, that's white people's problem. Good night. That's funny as hell. So to make their case, Turner and his wife had to prove they owned Manuel Allen. They claimed they had got him from Turner's father, John Turner Sr., and said he bought him from a man named Allen. And here's the problem with a lot of these is that there's no receipt, there's no proof of sale, right? It was a bit fuzzy. In the end, the court found that Turner and his wife had no title or right to transfer and sell the property claimed in Manuel, a Negro man, to the defendant. Sullivan got his money back and Allen got his freedom. Imagine that. He got his money back because they could not prove that they owned the slave they sold. You know, and that's funny as hell. All because, what's her name? Charlotte started saying, no, I ain't going back. That's what it says. Charlotte, she got the ball rolling. What do you call that? A snowball effect. Manuel Allen's case was still hanging fire that August when Robin and Lydia, with a 4-year-old mulatto girl called Jane, ran away from Farmer James Fraser of St. Mary's Current, around where the Jacques Cartier Bridge is today. Robin was described as a Negro about 5'6" tall. Lydia, partly of the mulatto to color. She is thick and well set. Good night. They said she good night. They said she got curves. She's a pretty light skinned thing. That's what they said. Salakia. You know. They said she's well set. Good night. Fraser posted a reward of $9 for their return and warned all masters of vessels and all others are hereby forbid to harbor, employ, carry off, or conceal said Negroes, as they will be prosecuted in the highest manner. They said James Fraser had the protection of government for said Negroes. They say, yeah, listen, you can't hide them, you can't employ them, you can't, you know, because James Fraser, basically, the government is protecting him, right? So Fraser seems to have got his slaves back because on March 19, 1799, Robin ran off again. And it wasn't until almost a year later, at the end of January 1800, that Fraser informed the magistrates that he suspected Robin was camped out at the Richard Dillon's Tavern in Place d'Armes, which is downtown Montreal today. That's the old port. The magistrates had Robin arrested, and since there was now a house of correction, that's where they put him. Mind you, at the time that all these Negroes were going free, the judge letting them free is because there's no house of correction. Now they have a house of correction. Then along to his aid came 21-year-old Alexander Perry, who was just starting out as a lawyer and whose folks were friends of Dillon. Perry applied for a right of habeas corpus to get Robin released. Meanwhile, Fraser filed papers in court to show that he had bought Robin in New York on July 10, 1773. And 10 years later, when the British left New York to the Americans at the end of the Revolution, he'd sailed to Nova Scotia with his slaves, Robin and Lydia. Then in 1784, he moved to the island of St. John's, which is Prince Edward Island today, and later to Montreal. So he's going to appeal to the court like, listen, I have the paperwork for these slaves. You ain't freeing nobody. He's mine. So the court looked at his papers, listened to the arguments, and on February 18, Chief Justice Monk, again, the same one who says, Charlotte, you're free to go, all you Negroes are free to go, there's no house of correction, right? So Chief Justice Monk and Justices Isaac Ogden and Pierre-Louis Panet, who had a sister in Missouri married to a founder of St. Louis, Auguste Choteau, you may have heard of him, which is the first one we covered, ruled that Robin be discharged from his confinement under the said warrant. He said, listen, let the nigga go. Let the nigga go. That's what they said. This man was mad as hell because he's producing all the paperwork. They're asking for paperwork. He got it. He got the paperwork. He got the receipts. He got the proof of purchase. You know, despite the evidence, this man said, listen, I don't give a damn. They have the house of correction. He said, let the nigga go. That's what they said. That's funny as hell. In the court's view, all of Fraser's papers didn't add up to 100% solid proof that he owned Robin. They didn't believe him. See, shout out to white people and their stupidity. One more time, Salakia. So now, the slave owner said, they said, bullshit, Salakia. Though they said it in a nice round way about their complaint to Lower Canada's Legislative Assembly, the petitioners, though they entertain a high opinion for the authority at the Honorable Court, cannot but remark that the evidence produced on that occasion was, in their apprehension, the best which it was possible in any case to produce, and that the court is desiring more and have asked what it would be impossible almost ever to obtain, and in this manner have divested all the owners of slaves of any property in them. These slave masters, listen, Canada fought hard to keep their slaves. Now that they're letting the slaves go, even if you produce the paperwork, like, damn, what can we do? Like, is slavery about to be over? It wasn't until 1834, but they're stressing the hell out. They're like, damn, all it takes is for a slave to say no, and then for us to not have a house of correction, then no, not the exact paperwork. That's all it takes. We're in a bad spot. And even with the paperwork, you're still not keeping the slave. All because of white man just don't give a damn. Shout out to Judge Monk. When you're in the kingdom with whoever is your slave master, he might be merciful. The Lord might be merciful on you to give you a slave master that has some type of mercy on you. He said, let the nigga go free. That's what he said. So that's funny as hell. He's stressing white people out of their caucasity just by saying he just don't give a damn. Not that he cares for Negroes. He just don't care about anything. And that's really it. Imagine that. We need more judges like this today. We need judges that don't care, that say, while you were here, well, you've been accused, but you're really not guilty. They want to put you in jail. You're free to go. We need more judges like him today. It's a lot here. It was as if the court had been as tough as that Vermont judge Harrington, who a few years later refused to send a runaway back to slavery, saying that nothing less than a bill of sale from God Almighty would convince him that one person could own another. Yeah, because they had a few judges like that. Judge Monk is not the only isolated case. In Vermont, they said, yeah, well, show me a bill from God that says, yeah, you could own him. Imagine the judge telling you, yeah, show me the receipt from the Most High himself that you can own niggas. White people are appalled at this point. Like, damn, what did I just hear? Did he really ask me that? You know, shout out to white people pissing white people off, taking their slaves away. Monk and company didn't go that far, but they came close because Monk just didn't give a damn. He was not saying, yeah, show me a bill from the Most High. He just said, hey, Shalom, you're free. Even if you bring him the paperwork, like, I don't give a damn about the paperwork. You're free to go. So they ruled that a British law of 1797 denying you the right to seize the slaves of a master who owed you money had repealed all the laws respecting slavery. Wherever they got that idea, it certainly wasn't from the law itself. It just wasn't true. The people make stuff up, just like the Negro boy we read about, Henry. Apparently he heard slavery was over. This nigga didn't know how to read. He said, I heard slavery was over. He said, yeah, it's over. You know. So like, I'm just seeing these comments now. That's funny as hell. I'm just seeing the comments now because I'm reading the PowerPoint, right? We'll get to the comments later. We have a troll in the comments. We have an idiot who wants attention. We'll give you 2 minutes in a few seconds, yeah? Shout out to the troll. Shout out to the chat. Shout out to everybody watching the class. Make sure you like, share, subscribe. You know, boost this algorithm. Keep commenting. You understand? But yeah, like I said, we're going to do a part 2. So let me keep reading, yeah? So wherever they got that idea, it wasn't true, right? All the slaves down to Demira and back could have told them so. All the slave owners of Montreal knew better, which is why they kept trying to get the assembly to lay down the laws on slavery. It never did. Why? Because listen, Montreal, they fought so hard to keep their slaves. You know, even when you keep hearing about the McGill Street, McGill University, I think his name was John McGill, something McGill. I think that John McGill, the founder of the McGill University, you know, whose McGill Street was named after, right? The McGill subway station. He was a slave owner. They fought hard to keep their slaves, you know. So those court rulings of 1798 to 1800 didn't abolish slavery overnight, but they gave it a death blow. See, the slave owners, being law-abiding men, which is really a stretch, and women, no longer had power over their slaves. The law said one thing, but the judge said another. Yeah, that was funny as hell. Slaves, too, must have wondered where they stood. Some, like Henry McVoy, which is the Negro kid we read about earlier, got wind of what the judges had said and took them at their words. Any slave who decided to walk, walked, and there was no legal way of stopping them. Others, too young to know or too sick or old or weary to take advantage, stayed put. Because they're like, listen, are we taking a chance or not? No, might as well just keep the status quo and remain the slaves that we are today. They don't want to gamble, right? So that's why you still saw the odd slaves around in the first 10 years or so in the 19th century. One sign that it was game over for slavery is that the last advertisement offering a slave for sale in Montreal was published on January 22nd, 1798, just before Charlotte started the ball rolling. For sale, the ad in the Gazette said, an excellent Negro wench aged about 30 years can do all kind of work belonging to a house, particularly washing and ironing. She has no fault and is very honest, sober, and industrious. Good night. Imagine that. That wasn't actual. These are actual ads. And next week, Lord allow, we have time to show you. I'm going to show you actual ads from the Montreal newspaper advertising the sale of slaves. In 1820, it was 1821, more than 20 years after Charlotte had stood her ground, when Jane Cook, her former owner, popped back into her life. Charlotte was married by then, the wife of John Trim. John Trim, yeah, I think, yeah, we're going to cover him as well. I think, what, next week? So they live on the east side of McGill Street, below Notre Dame Street, at the head of St. Maurice. Right, the bistro is a cafe over there today. Jane Cook needed her help. So Jane's sister Elizabeth had died abroad, a widow with no children. And as the last of the Cooks, Jane laid claim to her sister's estate. But there was no record of her parents' marriage, nothing to prove she and Elizabeth were their legitimate daughters on their only children. Jane Cook needed proof. Two Montreal men had sworn in July 1821 that she was the daughter of George Cook and Margaret Rafter, and the sister of Elizabeth. But their affidavits gave no hint of how they knew this. They might just have been repeating what Jane Cook had told them, so their statement proved nothing. If anyone had known the family was Charlotte, maybe she needed coaxing, or maybe it was Jane who needed time to swallow the humble pie. Anyway, 5 months passed between the time the two men gave their statement and the day Charlotte gave hers. It was on December 17th. It's short, written in legal language. See how neatly it avoids mentioning slavery, but it's the closest we come to hearing Charlotte herself. Right? So Charlotte, a native of Guinea in Africa, and wife of John Trim of Montreal, declared and affirmed upon oath that from the age of 12 years until she had attained the age of 30 years, she was in the service of George Cook and Margaret Rafter, both of whom are deceased. That the said George Cook and Margaret Rafter were considered by every person who knew them to be lawfully married and highly respected as such by the officers of His Majesty 60th Regiment, of which the said George Cook was a quartermaster sergeant, and the said Margaret Rafter was a nurse in the hospital. That they had two daughters named John and Elizabeth, who were considered to be legitimate children of the said George Cook, and Margaret Rafter were brought up in a decent and genteel manner, one of whom, John Cook, now resides in the city of Montreal. That after the death of said George Cook, the said Margaret Rafter married a Sergeant Mackenzie, also of the 60th Regiment, who was sent home to England by the colonel of the regiment by reason of his cruel treatment towards her. This done, declared and affirmed at the said city of Montreal. Now, mind you, that's her affidavit of Charlotte, right? She never mentioned that she was a slave on purpose, because that would have been the proof that Jane needed just to get her to work for her again. To work for a good night, to be, at her service. Salakia. So the one-time slave owner was at the mercy of her former slave. For Jane Cook, it was about property and inheritance, things just as Charlotte had once been a thing she inherited. For Charlotte, it was about something else. All right, gonna stop right here. Salakia. So basically, all she had to do is mention that she was a slave, and then she would have been back in slavery, unfortunately, which she didn't. Mosiah in Christ, right? Let me see. But basically, that's her affidavit, and Jane needed her to affirm, like, listen, to able to obtain the estate of my sister, because I have you have to prove that I'm such and such, I'm Elizabeth's sister, and that me and Elizabeth are legitimate kids from the Cook family, or whatever the case is, right? So we don't know if she actually did get the property back. It's irrelevant. Lord allow, she was homeless, dumb white woman. She don't deserve it anyways. In the kingdom, Lord allow, Charlotte rise again and owns Jane Cook and her family. It's a lot. Now, let me see the troll. There's a troll in the comments. Shalom, Officer Marabaria Bashash Rakata, sir. Dwar for 2 and 8. We're about to end it right here. There was a troll in the comments. I think he left already. You understand? This man say you like to hear yourself talk because you sound uneducated as F. I mean, listen, this is a book called Black Den. Y'all could just purchase it, rent it at the library. I don't claim to be a smart person. I just know shit. And what I know is that the white man's the devil the Bible speaks of, that the ISUPK is the home of the truth. That's pretty much it. This idiot said Can you tell when I.S.U.P.K was, listen, we've been here since 1969. I said this at the beginning and the end of every class. As a matter of fact, about to get the security announcements. We'll be back next week for part 2 of the class. Like, share, subscribe. You understand? With that, the water for everybody who tuned in. Get a security announcements. We'll end it right here. Shalom, Israel. So this is the I.S.U.P.K security announcements. We are the I.S.U.P.K, the Israelite School of Universal and Practical Knowledge. Started out on 1 West 125th Street, Harlem, New York. Rule for new brother and sister. When a new brother or sister comes into the school, they're off limits for 6 months. They're to be saluted only. They're here to shed themselves of the world. If they need transportation, the teacher will arrange it. After 6 months, if a brother or sister has an interest in a particular person, he or she must get permission to speak to a brother or a sister. There's another 6 months in which the brother and sister will court each other. After the 6 months period, the brother and sister will get permission from the head to marry, tithes, which is a commandment. Numbers chapter 18, verse 21, and Malachi chapter 3, verse 8 to 10, means 10th in the Hebrew, ma'ashara. 10% of every penny of any increase the Lord gives you. Give to the Treasury Department a teacher, priest fund, free will offering for priests, not mandatory, whatsoever amounts you would like. Upcoming Holy Convocation, we have the memorial of blowing of trumpets, which will be the first day of the 7th month, which is Sunday, September 21st, 2025. You can read more about it in the book of Leviticus, chapter 23, verse 24 to 25. I'm reminded to all Akim and the Kwatian to check the bulletin board in the hall of the school. They have a physical location. If anyone wants to be a trooper in the school, to start wearing all black, boots, shirt, pants, headband, and scarf. But that's all. We'll give a courtesy salute to the brothers and a courtesy salute to the sisters. Menavijal Imajim, which means to stand. We'll give a courtesy salute to the brothers. Menavijal Imajim Shabbat. Imajim, Barak, Yahweh Bahashem, Yahweh Shai Brakatam. Mean Yahweh in the name of Yahweh Shai bless y'all. Yajamata, which means hands down. Sar, which means to turn and face the sisters. If you have any in your presence, we'll give them a courtesy salute as well. Menavijal Imajim Shabbat. Imajim, Barak, Yahweh Shemar, Alatan Bahashem, Yahweh Shai. And Yahweh watch over y'all in the name of Yahweh Shai. Yajamata, class dismissed.
Check me out, dog. Roll the window up, man. The water. Ain't no better, dog, brother. The son of a king. I don't Balenciaga. I might just wear Kyla. I might just wear the Pradas. But I'm thinking long term, so I might say the dollars. We ain't no better, I'm just being honest. I should've went to college, but I was thinking violence. It's a one West world, we the fucking livest. Break it down, we break ground, we don't break no damn promise. Let's get active, dog, don't tell me how you feel about it. These cats saying too much, they ain't learn enough. You maxed out the first quarter, I'm still warming up. These niggas tossing up a brick, they can't score with us. Who gon' come against us? On the Lord with us. Them niggas riding for you. I hope they ride till they crash. Put my name in your mouth, I put my belt to your ass. I ain't running no race, I just hope that I last. All them niggas you look up to, I consider them trash. Only time you seen a leader was in Wayne hand. Niggas will dap you, then pop you with the same hand. I'm a main player, I stick to the game plan. He don't really fuck with you, that's your main man. We them niggas came through and made your city hot. Yup, said he in the field, but he really not. And I ain't casting no stone, I just let him rock. And that's the kind of story they gon' read about. But if it's war, it ain't no tapping out. Grip still heat, spit like a dragon mouth.
Hey, listen, brothers and sisters, man, if you like what you hear, hit the subscribe button, man. Subscribe to this channel. And also, please, go to isupk.com and pay your tithe. Drop me some cash so we can move around this planet like we need to, man, and do the things we need to do.
They're one West. They're one West. They're one West. They're